Justin Baldoni and his team have fired back at Blake today, saying that they're going to continue their legal fight despite the judge having dismissed all of their claims, and most of them with prejudice, which means they can't refile. Brian Friedman and the rest of Baldoni's lawyers were extremely quiet yesterday, and no comment was given until today. Well, they've come back today saying that they are going to move forward with the same confidence that they had when Miss Lively and her cohorts initiated this battle. Brian Friedman went on to say, while the court dismissed the defamation-related claims, the court has invited us to amend 4 out of the 7 claims against Miss Lively, which will showcase additional evidence and refined allegations. Now, this is what I don't understand. So he claims that he's been invited to amend 4 out of the 7 claims, meaning 3 were tossed. But when I go through the document, which I spent 2.5 hours going through today, it does not appear to be 4 out of the 7 that he's invited to amend and resubmit. So according to the judge, it says when a motion to dismiss is granted, the usual practice is to grant leave to amend the complaint. So normally, if the motion to dismiss is given, they have a chance to amend it. But he goes on to say, it is well established that leave to amend a complaint need not be granted when amendment would be futile. The court will not grant leave to amend the majority of the Wayfarer party's claims because amendment would be futile. He says majority. Now, 4 out of 7 is not the majority. If Baldoni's lawyer is saying he's allowed to resubmit 4 out of 7, the judge would not have said majority. Now, honestly, none of this sounds good in the judge's write-up. He said this about Baldoni's team. He said the Wayfarer parties do not identify any particular factual allegations, no factual allegations, that could be added to support the defamation or civil extortion claims. Nor is it plausible that any allegations not yet mentioned would change the basic substance of Lively's threats, the conclusion that the CRD complaint was privileged, or the conclusion that relative statements were made without actual malice. So basically what he said in the 132-page response that he gave was that nothing Blake said or did, or Sloan or Ryan Reynolds, was defamation or civil extortion. He also went on to say that nothing that he says could change Blake's threats because she didn't get anything from them, and most of these threats that she said, Baldoni's team didn't follow through, if the threats even existed. He also went on to say the conclusion that the CRD complaint was privileged, so anything in her complaint was privileged. She's allowed to share this. The New York Times was allowed to share this because he's a public figure, so there was nothing in that they can sue over. As for Baldoni's lawyers being able to amend things, this is what the judge had to say. He said, the court will grant leave to amend the claims for tortious interference with contract and breach of implied contract, and just those 2 things. And they said that basically in the amended complaint that Baldoni filed, the Wayfarer parties failed to plead the specific details of any contract that was had between Baldoni and WME, which was the agency that they all worked for. It said that according to Baldoni's team, they say that they can supposedly prove this. So they're going to let him amend that if he can do this. They also said that the allegations about Blake breaching contract, they didn't include any contract. And in fact, in numerous spaces, they said that Blake refused to sign certain contracts. So they're saying that if Baldoni's team can provide some sort of contract that Blake signed, then possibly they could go through with this lawsuit. So we ended off this section by saying, without seeing these contracts, the court cannot say that amending the breach of implied covenant claim could be futile. So he's saying he can't dismiss this one because apparently Baldoni claims they could provide contracts, and until they see it, they can't say it's futile. The other part that's hanging over Justin Baldoni's head right now is if you have a frivolous claim, a futile claim, then the defendant can go ahead and file for all the expenses. So they can get their legal fees back, they can get punitive damages, etc. So what they have said right now is that they dismissed or denied this motion for now. They said the court denies the motion without prejudice, which means that Blake's team can refile this. And it says to renew in accordance with the ruling here because they need further factual development. So they're saying that if Baldoni's team can present these contracts that they claim that they have as evidence, then perhaps it's not as futile as they thought, and Blake wouldn't be able to go after her legal expenses. However, if their team cannot provide this information, then Blake can refile and possibly get all of her legal fees, get punitive damages, etc., because of what they did and what they filed. So in conclusion, the judge summed it up by saying the motions to dismiss are granted. So Blake, Ryan, Leslie Sloan, the New York Times, all of them were granted their dismissal. That means all of his lawsuits were tossed. But Baldoni has just until June 23rd to amend a second time his complaint, and he could only amend the two. It says, amending only the allegations relevant to the claims of tortious interference with contract and breach of implied covenant. As you know, Lively's legal team yesterday called this a total victory and a complete vindication. As we've said from day one, this $400 million lawsuit was a sham, and the court saw right through it. In Brian Friedman's statement today, he added, this case is about false accusations of sexual harassment and retaliation and a non-existent smear campaign, which Miss Lively's own team conveniently described as untraceable because they cannot prove what never happened. It does not appear right now that the judge agrees with Brian Friedman's statement, however. He actually wrote in his opinion this: the CRD complaint and article, which is Blake Lively's complaint and the New York Times article, contain numerous messages and documents strongly suggesting the Wayfarer parties did spread negative stories about Lively. It went on to say, a reader of those messages would have little doubt that the Wayfarer parties engaged in a smear campaign. The article does not claim that the smear campaign was the only source of backlash against Lively. It acknowledges, though, that it is impossible to know how much of the negative publicity was seeded by Miss Nathan, Mr. Wallace, and his team. Given the strength of the evidence in favor of the smear campaign, it is not plausible that the Times entertained serious doubts as to the truth of the smear campaign narrative as a whole, even if, for whatever reason, it misrepresented one particular set of messages in aid of that narrative. Despite that, Brian Friedman went on to say, most importantly, Miss Lively's own claims are no truer today than they were yesterday. And with the facts on our side, we march forward with the same confidence that we had when Miss Lively and her cohorts initiated this battle, and look forward to her forthcoming deposition, which I will be taking. We all know that line was a little dig at Blake Lively because she did not want Brian Friedman doing her deposition. He went on to say, we are grateful for the organic show of support from the public and for the dedication of the internet sleuth community who continue to cover the case with discernment and integrity. I have gone through all 132 pages of the judge's opinion and his dismissal with a fine-tooth comb, and I'm going to go over this tonight, and I will upload it to my YouTube channel. So make sure you follow that, which is just my name, The Recap with Julie. I will hopefully have that video up by tomorrow evening. I think this document is going to be extremely important for everyone who has been Team Baldoni to listen to, as well as people that have been sitting on the fence and not knowing what side to believe. The judge broke everything down in his allegations, basically calling it a narrative and saying it lacked factual evidence as to the things they're claiming Blake Lively did. So again, make sure you hit follow and check out my YouTube channel by tomorrow evening, and I should have the full video of me going through all 132 pages and letting you know exactly what the judge had to say.